rise, ministers are very aware of their responsibilities to get back to honourable members before those statutory instruments come into effect.
Well, I think that's a very helpful intervention from the Leader of the House, but I'm sure that if she's outlined the programme that is in train, and I'm sure that honourable members and right honourable members will keep their beady eyes on the situation and ensure that ministers are as well prepared as possible. Thank you. We now come to presentation of Bill. Stuart Malcolm MacDonald. Second reading what day?
Friday the 15th of March.
Friday the 15th of March. Thank you. Presentation of Bill. Richard Ford.
Military Action Parliamentary Approval Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 26th of January.
Friday the 26th of January. Thank you very much. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Neil Hanvey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to amend the Scotland Act 1998 to transfer the power to legislate for a Scottish independence referendum to the Scottish Parliament, to provide that such power may only be exercised where the Scottish public had demonstrated its support for holding such a referendum, to provide that no such referendum may be held sooner than 7 years following any previous such referendum, and for connected purposes. I'm standing up for the right for self-determination. I'm standing up for our territory. I'm standing up for our people. I'm standing up for international law. I'm standing up for all those territories, those small territories and peoples the world over. These are the words of then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, recounted from her Downing Street years memoirs. She goes on to say, the principle of self-determination has become a fundamental component of international law and is enshrined in the UN Charter. That principle she spoke of, the principle of self-determination of peoples, was enshrined in the UN Charter when Prime Minister Winston Churchill signed the 1941 Atlantic Charter. Any notion that Scots freely entered into the Union by an act of self-determination has no credibility whatsoever. In 1707, a majority of Scottish parliamentarians may have been persuaded, but the people were never consulted. The Acts of Union 1707 between England and Scotland created the Kingdom of Great Britain, establishing a single political entity, yet preserving the territorial, legal and institutional integrity of each partner country. The UK's constitution is not codified in a single document, so the question of whether the Acts of Union can be unilaterally dissolved by one party is not clear. However, the accepted position hitherto is that the Union is a voluntary association of equal partners and that Scotland has an unquestioned right of self-determination. Scotland's distinct constitutional tradition is best expressed by Lord Cooper in the case of McCormack versus Lord Advocate, which says the principle of the unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctively English principle which has no counterpart in Scottish constitutional law. And in the pleadings of the Honourable and Learned Member for Edinburgh South West in her prorogation case to the UK Supreme Court, it was noted that the 1707 parliamentary union between England and Scotland may have created a new state, but it did not create one nation. In recent years, the UK state has steadfastly refused to acknowledge or honour the principle or the democratic wishes of the Scottish electorate. According to distinguished academic and legal practitioner in international law, Professor Robert McCorquodale, the people of Scotland are distinct within the UK and have a right to self-determination. And as the people of Scotland are a people for the purposes of the right to self-determination, the choice of the means to exercise it is for the people to decide, not for the state. These are not obscure or arcane points of law, they are precise and purposeful, and according to Professor McCorquodale, such treaty obligations are binding under international law on all states. The question of whether the ancient nation of Scotland should be an independent country once again continues to be the subject of much debate. In short, with current support sitting at 50% across the population and above 70% among younger people, the matter is far from settled. It is entirely proper for any country to review such important matters, because Scotland will only become independent as and when a majority of the people of Scotland choose that path. This demands the use of a democratic mechanism that is constitutional and satisfies international legal precedent. This bill seeks to standardise and codify such a requirement in line with the motion passed by this House, which endorsed the principles of the 1989 Claim of Right and which acknowledged the sovereign right of the Scottish people to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. At that time, the Claim of Right was supported by every political party save the Tories. In particular, Liberal Democrat MPs such as Ray Mitchie and Charles Kennedy were forthright in their support for the principle of Scottish sovereignty. They were following a Home Rule tradition in that party, which never for a second disputed Scotland's right of self-determination, albeit they thought Scotland should choose a form of federalism rather than independence. It would be unfortunate then today if, already having deserted their historic commitment to the European cause, the Liberal Democrats were to follow that by deserting their historic commitment to respecting Scotland's national rights. This morning, the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West called this bill, which favours neither one side nor the other, divisive and unnecessary, when it is anything but. It is in fact both liberal and fundamentally democratic. The effect of this bill should be uncontroversial for every member. It merely establishes in law an equivalent mechanism to the principle already conceded by the UK government in relation to a border poll in Northern Ireland. Firstly, that the power to legislate for a referendum requires a democratic mandate from the Scottish public to do so. Since 2014, that criterion has been met in successive general elections to the Scottish Parliament, most recently in 2021, where a majority of MSPs were elected and a majority of votes were cast in favour of a manifesto commitment to deliver an independence referendum. Secondly, this bill states that no such referendum may be held any sooner than every 7 years after any previous such referendum. Should members of this chamber deny Scotland her legitimate claim on self-determination, then it will have put beyond doubt that the voice of the people of Scotland is not welcome in this place, and a new approach must be considered. This bill offers both remedy and root. It places the power to decide firmly where it belongs, in the hands of the people of Scotland, and it does so by transferring the power to hold a referendum on independence to the Scottish Parliament. It is a parallel initiative to that being led by my Alba Party colleague Ash Regan MP in the Scottish Parliament. Ms Regan has brought forward a draft bill that would allow a referendum to be held to ask the people of Scotland if they think that the Scottish Parliament should have the powers to negotiate and legislate for independence. Its purpose is to consult the people of Scotland on their opinion on extending the provisions of their Parliament to hold such a referendum, a proposition supported by expert legal opinion of Aidan O'Neill KC. Both proposals have at their heart the democratic imperative that Scotland's political destiny must be in the hands of the people of Scotland, not in the hands of a Westminster Parliament or the Supreme Court. How does the behaviour of the UK government or the repeated espoused position of the opposition party constitute access to meaningful political process as claimed in the recent UK Supreme Court judgment? In the aftermath of the 2014 referendum, the All-Party Smith Commission agreement was signed by all of Scotland's main political parties, SNP, Labour, Tory and Liberal Democrats, and it stated, "It is agreed that nothing in this report prevents Scotland becoming an independent country in the future, should the people of Scotland so choose." While each have failed to deliver on that commitment, this bill provides a necessary, equitable and democratic mechanism for the people of Scotland. In 1889, in this place, the equality of the UK partner countries was asserted by a Liberal MP, William Ewart Gladstone, when he said the following: "I am to suppose a case in which Scotland, unanimously or by a clearly preponderating voice, were to make the demand on the United Parliament to be treated not only on the same principle, but in the same manner as Ireland. I could not deny the title of Scotland to urge such a claim."
Good old Gladstone.
John Major, when Prime Minister, said of Scotland, No nation could be held irrevocably in a union against its will. It is increasingly apparent that this is not a union of equals. The UK is willfully subverting the will of the people of Scotland by denying them their established human rights as enshrined in the UN Charter and international treaty obligations, which the UK state entered into freely. At the opening of my speech, I cited the words of Lady Thatcher, but she went further. The Scots, being a historic nation with a proud past, have an undoubted right to national self-determination. Should they determine on independence, no English party or politician would stand in their way, however much we might regret their departure. Whether I like it or loathe it, we are in this union, and I hold that it is incumbent on every MP elected on an independence ticket to explore every option with courage and conviction. Today, this chamber faces a choice. Affirm that this is a voluntary union of equals, or tell the world that Scotland is a mere possession to do with as you wish. This bill is a necessary condition for securing Scottish democracy, and I commend it to the House.
I call Christine Jardine to speak for no more than 10 minutes in opposition to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath on securing this debate, this motion, but also on his knowledge of Liberal political history. I have to confess, though, that my overwhelming emotion, my overwhelming sentiment on hearing of this debate was, oh, not again. Surely this has been settled not just by the Supreme Court ruling, but the repeated occasions on which the people of Scotland, myself included, other MPs here, the electorates of several constituencies, and the majority of people at the last general election and in the referendum made it clear that no, we cannot be held in a union against our will. But our will is to stay. So here we are. On the anniversary of the parliamentary approval of the Act of Union in 1707, going over the same nationalist argument again and again. The argument which has been rejected in the referendum and rejected at the general election. This could and should be a day when the people of this country might expect their elected representatives to be considering the importance of what has gone before as a result of that act. Considering what we have achieved and what we have built and what we can continue to build and improve upon as part of the Union. Because, as the Honourable Member said, as a Liberal and a Liberal Democrat, I do fundamentally believe in Home Rule for Scotland. I do fundamentally agree that the United Kingdom needs to change. And I do agree that the people of Scotland deserve incremental increases in power. But that is because I believe in a federal United Kingdom. I have said so on numerous occasions and will continue to do so. I would also point out that in the past 45 years, there have been 3 referendums on Scottish future, Scottish political future, the Scottish people's future, and the state of the Constitution. Every single one of them was facilitated by the United Kingdom government. And on every occasion, the Scottish people have benefited. As a result of the second one, we have devolution. And surely even those devolution sceptics can see the good that has come from our Parliament. The benefits we have seen not just in Scotland, but from devolution in Wales, and the great changes we've seen in Northern Ireland, and let's not forget of devolution to the Assembly in London. The third referendum on independence in 2014 was facilitated by the UK government when they felt that the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish parliamentary elections had proven that there was a mandate. I know this because, and I have a declaration of interest to declare, I worked on that referendum. And as a result, we have more devolved powers. We have come so far since the turn of the new century in devolving powers in this country, so it is closer to the people most affected by it. It would be dreadful to undermine that, to throw the baby out with the bathwater for a separatist argument. And let's be clear, that is what some colleagues want to do. It is not a secret that I disagree fundamentally with my colleagues on the ALBA and SNP benches about independence and where Scotland should be heading, particularly at a time when what is required of us in this place is to work together to solve the ills that are blighting people across these isles. And I would repeat, in doing that, the UK government is not a block on more devolution. They have worked to enable it. And whatever nationalists might tell us, independence is not an answer to our problems. It is not even the question that most people in Scotland want to raise. That question is about inflation, about interest rates, about the cost of living. They constantly, in my constituency, ask me about instability across governments and ideological decisions. They want to address the problems with our education system in Scotland, with our NHS in Scotland, with our public services in Scotland, all of which have declined during the period of nationalist government when the only thing they prioritised was independence. And we are suffering, and we do not want to do that anymore. But perhaps if the nationalists lifted their heads from their ideological manifesto about separation, and perhaps if they listened a little more to the people of Scotland and stopped taking the support for granted, they would know that themselves. They would know that they may not like this particular government, and there are times when, frankly, I agree wholeheartedly with the people of Scotland. They don't like this particular government, but they see an opportunity for change coming in the next few months. Perhaps that is why the nationalists are putting new impetus into their cause, because they see that there is an opportunity for change coming, and that people will choose to change the government rather than the constitution. The problem that is before us is that the United Kingdom, we all know, is not perfect. Of course it isn't. What governmental system is? It needs reform. We need to move forward, I believe, to a more federal system. But what we do not need is more division, more rancour, at a time when we already have a list of problems in this country longer than any of us would like. This proposition before us would do little to address those very real problems faced by my constituents and everyone else in Scotland. It would, as I say, be just one more division, more arguments, same old grievances. It's time to move on. Accept that the will of the Scottish people, as expressed regularly, is to remain in the United Kingdom and work to improve it and the lives of all of the people of the United Kingdom. The Scottish people have expressed their will. No, they cannot be, as we have all said, held in a union against our will. But our will is to stay in that United Kingdom. And I would ask this House not to waste any more time on an argument that the Scottish people have settled and will do so again at the next general election.
Question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. 2 minutes now.
Those tellers.
Can we have tellers?
Yes. If they're not putting in tellers, the
tellers?
division's off.
They're over there.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Tellers for the ayes, Jonathan Edwards and Carol Monaghan. Tellers for the noes, William Ragg and Sir Robert Buckler. the doors. Order.
The ayes to the right, 48. The noes to the left, 228.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 48. The noes to the left, 228. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock. Order. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Safety of Rwanda, Asylum and Immigration Bill, Committee.
Now. Order. Order.
Safety of Rwanda, Asylum and Immigration Bill.
I remind members that in committee, members should not address the chair as Deputy Speaker. Please use our names when addressing the chair, or Madam Chair, Chair, Madam Chairman, or Mr. Chairman are also acceptable. Lots of options. That's my name. I mentioned that to start. We begin with Amendment 45 to Clause 2, with which it will be convenient to consider other amendments to Clause 2, Clause 2 stand part, amendments to Clause 4 stand part, new Clause 6, and amendments to Clause 9, which relate to Clause 2, as set out in the selection paper. I call Alison Thulis to move Amendment 45.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move the amendments in my name and the names of my honourable colleagues. The SNP have brought forward amendments to this appalling bill, not because we believe really that there are improvements which could be made to it, but because that is the limitation of the process that we have in front of us this afternoon. This bill is irredeemably awful in each and every provision, in every clause, and with the intent behind it. And it will not work. Like the hostile environment that came before, the Nationality and Borders Act and the Illegal Migration Act, which only got royal assent 180 days ago, It will fail to reach its objectives because it fails to engage with reality. The more I hear from government benches on this issue, the many Home Office ministers who have come and gone before, I can only feel that they just do not understand why people seek sanctuary on our shores. They are astonishing in their ignorance and baffling in the lack of effort that they put into understanding. And one of the reasons, those reasons that people do come to the UK, is the UK's now clearly defunct reputation for fairness and the rule of law, which this bill comprehensively shreds. The Committee for the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants have highlighted the impact that all of this has had on people that they deal with. They have mentioned a Kurdish client who fled Iran under a death sentence by the Iranian government. On arriving in the UK, he was issued a removal notice to Rwanda. He said, "The reason I came to England is that I knew I would be safe in the UK, and I was trapped by the smugglers. When I received the news that I would be sent to Rwanda, it felt like death again to me." At the Supreme Court ruling, this person was relieved. He thought he was going to be safe, and now he is he has had the rug pulled underneath him yet again.
Point of order.
This does seem very much a second reading to me. It'd be very helpful if the Honourable Lady could direct the amendments in which we're interested to hear what she's got to say.
It's actually amendments and clause stand part.
Yes.
So that just give a little wider scope than perhaps the Right Honourable Gentleman realised. Alison Toulis. Oh.
Thank you very much, Dame Rosie. I'm glad the Honourable Gentleman has had your advice on the subject of this debate. Madam Deputy Speaker, to put this into context, I sit in front of people every single week in my advice surgeries and listen patiently to the stories of constituents who come to see me. I have often read their Home Office statements. They have been through trauma. They have made perilous journeys at unimaginable cost. They have been tortured and they bear the scars, both physical and mental. They have seen their relatives murdered. They have run rather than be forcibly recruited into an army that would kill and rape their loved ones. They have been victims of trafficking and slavery. They have been unable to hide their views of their identity from those who would persecute them. They have seen the stable life that they have built crumble before their eyes. They never planned to be sitting on a random Friday morning in a community centre in Glasgow in tears before a member of some other country's parliament. They don't understand why this UK government treats them so poorly, disbelieves them, forces them to wait, prevents them from working, keeps them apart from the only loved ones they have left, and I can't comprehend it either. If you can tell me why the government treats people so poorly, yes, I would.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way, and I've been listening with interest to the compassion that she is expressing. But could she tell me how many illegal asylum seekers per head of population Scotland is accommodating, and how many illegal asylum seekers per head of population England is accommodating?
Gentle should inform himself, because there is no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker in the first place. He can sit down, he's made his point. These fellow human beings from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Yemen, from Libya, from Iran, from Iraq, from Ethiopia, from Eritrea, from Sudan, from China, from the DRC, from Cameroon, Tamils from Sri Lanka, Ahmadiyas from Pakistan, all of these and more have given me just the tiniest of insights into their lives. It is a privilege to know them and to help them as much as I can as their MP. Glasgow is home to many different nationalities, and it gives me great pleasure to attend community events and celebrate the diversity that enriches us, to learn to dance the Atan Swain, to teach Afghan Scots in return to do the Gay Gordons and the Dashing White Sergeant, to be called up to sing very badly alongside the wonderful Maryhill Integration Network Joyous Choir, to share the most delicious food from Africa Alba and Africa Future, to play football as badly as I sing in the refugee football tournament that is held every year in Scotland, organised by Councillor Abdul Bastani.
I don't want to try your patience, but Clause 2 is about the safety of Rwanda, and this has nothing to do with that at all.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for his point of order. He can leave it with me, honestly. And I do think it's rather discourteous to keep disrupting the debate. I will keep a close eye, I can assure him, and if the Honourable Lady veers off track, I will make sure she gets back on track. But can we just not have the debate disrupted constantly like this? Alison Toulis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And perhaps if you would like to come along to listen to Olivia Ndotti and the women at the Women's Integration Network in Glasgow, maybe he'll hear from people from Rwanda, because this government grants asylum to people from Rwanda because that country is not safe. I don't believe that anyone who supports this awful bill can do so knowing the people it will affect. To lay out in such cruel terms that they would remove the rights of our fellow human beings because all they did was seek sanctuary and safety. It undermines our obligations under international law and in the need for individualised protection guaranteed, for example, under the Anti-Trafficking Convention. That this government seeks to declare a country safe by legislating for it to be so is an absolute affront. Our Amendment 48 simply seeks to change safe to unsafe, because for every decision maker to be forced to declare any country safe, regardless of the facts in front of them, regardless of their own knowledge, regardless of circumstance, flies in the face of the justice and the rights that the UK is supposed to stand for. It is illogical. Amnesty has called this treating fact as false.
Amendment 45 in particular. That amendment, as she's just said, would permanently in this legislation designate Rwanda as an unsafe country. And she's just complained about having to designate decision makers the other way. So, one, what is the difference? Secondly, isn't that offensive to Rwanda? Thirdly, isn't that worrying to the 100+ refugees from Libya who the UN recently settled in Rwanda? And under what circumstances would she then agree to legislation which recognise Rwanda, again, as a safe country?
I believe it's fundamentally unwise to recognise countries as safe in perpetuity, because things are unsafe. This amendment highlights the illogicality of this bill. Neither of these things should be legislated upon at all. And to make the point around the Libyans that are being transited through Rwanda, they're not settling in Rwanda, they're being transited through Rwanda to other countries like Canada, for example. I want to make some progress. I know that he will want to contribute later on, and I want to touch on what the UNHCR have said about this. They have reviewed the updated UK-Rwanda scheme, and they say, and I quote, "It maintains its position that the arrangement as now articulated in the UK-Rwanda Partnership Treaty and accompanying legislative scheme does not meet the required standards relating to the legality and appropriateness of the transfer of asylum seekers and is not compatible. It is not compatible with international refugee law." Equally, this bill does not have any kind of sunset clause. It doesn't have a set of circumstances by which it can acknowledge a change in the situation in Rwanda. This is foolhardy and it is bad legislation. The clauses which talk about mere monitoring of this situation do not go far enough, and is a prime example of the incompetence of this legislation and how it cannot really be made to work. There has been ongoing tension, for example, with the neighbouring Democratic Republic of Congo, where recently elected President Tshisekedi has been quoted in relation to Rwandan-backed M23 rebels, saying, "If you re-elect me and Rwanda persists, I will request the Parliament and Congress to authorise a declaration of war. We will march on Kigali. Tell Kagame those days of playing games with Congolese leaders are over." So I ask members opposite, what happens to their precious treaty and to this legislation should this situation escalate? None of us want to see that, but it could happen. What would happen, more importantly, to anybody that the Home Secretary had sent to Rwanda in the interim to this unsafe situation? They would not be able to bring them back. They would be stuck in a situation of conflict. It is beyond me how members opposite and former ministers, members of the legal profession, could sign up to amendments shredding the rule of law and human rights. Our amendments 46, 47, 48, 49 and 50 are an attempt at the very minimum reinstate the powers of our courts and tribunals to do their work. They are the people qualified to make these decisions and do so, for the most part, with great diligence. Their services are stretched and there's much more that could be improved were the UK government not chucking away hundreds of millions of pounds at distractions like the legislation they bring here today. They have also recently published their consultation response on safe and legal routes following the Illegal Migration Act, and it offers nothing. It offers no change whatsoever, no safe and legal routes that are new and would help to resolve the situation. The Refugee Council have presented a credible alternative to this, and the Minister could not be less interested. Madam Chair, I honestly don't know what to say about the amendments of the former Minister, the member for Newark, and his cabal. It sickens me that they would treat people this way. Surely the only way in their minds that they can justify treating asylum seekers this way is that they consider them to be less, that they do not matter and they can therefore be shipped off as if they were some kind of inconvenient waste, stirring up fear and hatred of people who only came here to ask for our protection. This is real lives, not some political game. And for the focus in the Tory psychodramas and the benches opposite, this is real people and real people's lives. On these benches, we say that they are humans just like us. Shame on all of them. Madam Chair, I would like to have seen much more from the Labour Party in opposing this vile legislation. They concern themselves today simply with an amendment around the risk of refoulement, not the tawdry practice in itself of offshoring asylum seekers. Labour's new Clause 6 merely seeks to monitor this shoddy deal, not to dismantle it. Last week, they would not be clear if it was the principle of Rwanda or just the costs that they found problematic. So I asked them, the Shadow Minister, would he revoke this legislation? Overruling courts, treating people as if they were less than human, not entitled to the rights that we all expect. These are dark days, Madam Chair. This is not normal, and nor should it become so. On the SNP benches, we will fight this rotten bill all the way, today, tomorrow, and any opportunity we get, not in our name.
The question is that Amendment 45 be made. Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Dame Rosie, and I rise to speak in favour of the amendments in my name and that of my honourable friend, the member for Stone. Dame Rosie, a single question, at least on our side, hangs over this debate. What works? It doesn't matter whether this is the most robust piece of immigration legislation we've ever done. That's not relevant. It doesn't matter whether this is a suitable compromise between this faction or that. That might be a noble aim, but that's not what we're here to do on behalf of our constituents today. What matters is, does this scheme work? And why does that matter? It matters because illegal migration is doing untold damage to our country. It is costing us billions of pounds. It's exploiting tens of thousands of people. It's leaving a trail of human misery across Europe, across North Africa and beyond. People are drowning in the English Channel and will continue to do so month after month. We have to fix this problem. And we in this House have the power to do so and the responsibility on our shoulders. The question is, are we willing to do it? I will give way to the honourable gentleman in a moment. Let me finish my point. The current bill doesn't work. And the test of whether it works is not can we get a few symbolic flights off in the months ahead with a small number of illegal migrants on them. The test is can we create the kind of sustainable deterrent that we set out to achieve. The sustainable deterrent that my right honourable friend, the member for Whittam, set out to achieve when she secured this groundbreaking deal with Rwanda. The kind of deterrent that protects not just this country for generations to come from the scourge of illegal migration, but the whole continent of Europe. Because I can tell all honourable and right honourable members, having spoken to almost every interior minister and immigration minister, not just in Europe, but in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Turkey, they all ask, when are you getting this policy up and running? Will it work? And they want it to work, because they know if we can create a sustainable deterrent, we will stop people coming, we will secure Europe's borders, we will save lives. And in an age of mass migration, this is one of the most important challenges that we have to face. I'll give way to the right honourable gentleman.
Great.
Sir Chris Bryant.
I completely agree with him about one thing. I don't think this bill will work. I don't think it will work if it has the amendments that he's tabled included in it either. And that is because I think he and I come to a completely different position as to the nature of the deterrence and whether it would work at all. Because it seems to me self-evident that there must be an enormous deterrent if you have to get in a tiny boat, risking your life as a pregnant woman with children beside you, having paid thousands of pounds to a vile, despicable people trafficker. Why? What evidence does he have that this plan, gimmick, is any more deterrent than that?
If the right honourable gentleman were right, then hundreds of thousands of people wouldn't be making that very journey every year. There are millions of people in the world who want to make this journey. There are thousands of people in France seeking to pay people smugglers to come to our country. The only way you will stop this is if you break the people smugglers' business model once and for all. So it is clear, beyond doubt, that if you come to this country, you will be detained and swiftly removed to Rwanda or to another safe country. And where the right honourable gentleman is wrong is he, like the Labour front bench, believe completely erroneously that you can arrest your way out of this problem. Yes. Well, the National Crime Agency don't support them in that contention, and I have not seen any evidence that that will work. Nobody who's looked into this problem believes that these fungible and complex gangs that stretch across Europe and beyond, who import boats for next to nothing from China and Bulgaria and Turkey, can just be arrested out of their existence. Everyone says the same thing: create a deterrent. That is what the Rwanda policy does. I won't give way again to the right honourable gentleman. Let me move forward and speak more directly to our amendments, because that's the purpose of today. The amendments that have been brought forward in my name and that of my honourable friend, the member for Stone, in 4 groups, 2 of which will be heard and discussed today, 2 tomorrow, seek to address the evident flaws of the bill. And they represent the last opportunity for us to get this policy right. Let me speak directly to the one that is in my name, and my right honourable friend for Stone can speak to the one which he leads. Mine speaks to individual claims, and this is a point that I have made time and again. All my experience at the Home Office teaches me that every single illegal migrant coming to this country will try every possible way to avoid being removed. We know that. That's what they do today. It's human nature that people would do this. You have to legislate for human nature, not against it. And every legal representative and lefty lawyer will try everything they can to support those claims. We see it every time. Experience teaches us this. Now, the bill does improve the situation. The bill makes it tighter, but only in respect of the general safety of Rwanda, not in respect of an individual's circumstance. So I'll give way to that in a moment. But so as night follows day, every migrant will say, Rwanda may be generally safe, and I believe it is, but it's not safe for me. And that is one of the central intellectual incoherences, as the government's own lawyers have said, at the heart of this bill. It envisages that Rwanda is generally safe, but for a range of unspecified reasons, foresees that Rwanda will not be safe for others. And of course, as we've seen in the past, one person will mount a successful challenge. That will create a precedent. Every legal representative and NGO like Care for Calais will then school everyone to make exactly the same challenge. And time and again, we will lose these cases in the courts. So the bill in that respect is legally flawed, but it's also operationally flawed because of that. And let me explain to those who are not as well versed as, understandably, those of us who've been ministers in this field are. We only have 2,000 detained spaces in our immigration removal centres in this country. On a single day in August, 1,200 people arrived illegally on our shores. So in a weekend, all the detained capacity in the whole United Kingdom would be consumed. So when you're considering whether this bill works or not, see it through that lens. We have to get people out of the country within days, not months. And the operational plan behind this bill foresees that people will take months to be removed from the country. So what will happen is that our detained capacity will be filled, people will then be bailed to hotels, they will then abscond and never be seen again. And within a single week in August, this scheme will have failed. Now, that matters for the country, of course it matters for the government, it matters for trust in politics and Westminster, because we will have told people it was going to work, knowing that it will not work, and it matters for all those other European countries who want this scheme to succeed, to protect our borders. Well, I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and he's making a good case for deterrent, but I fear a bad case for his amendments. As the Home Affairs Select Committee found out, when the Rwanda scheme was announced, there was a big surge of people in Calais trying to regularise their status in France because they didn't want to risk being sent to Rwanda. So deterrents do work. But does he not acknowledge, he's just said this is the last opportunity to get this right, that there is a very large chance that his amendments would make this bill unworkable, not least in the eyes of the Rwandan government, in which case we have no deterrence, so therefore what is the alternative then?
Question head on. I've known the honourable gentleman for a long time, and he wasn't born yesterday. That argument is not a plausible one, in my opinion. The argument that the Rwandan government would walk away from this scheme was raised not just at the 11th hour, but
1 minute to midnight.
1 minute to midnight. It's predicated on the belief that the government of Rwanda would walk away from a scheme on the grounds that it might conceivably fall foul of the European Convention on Human Rights, which Rwanda is not itself a party to, and where the only reason we would fall foul of the European Convention of Human Rights would have been because of conduct in Rwanda itself. Yeah. I don't find that a plausible argument, I'm afraid. And if it were the correct response, why then pilot a bill through Parliament where on the very front page it says the government cannot attest to the fact that the bill is compliant with international law? Why would the Prime Minister say that he's willing to ignore foreign judges when his own legal advice says that that's in breach of international law? And why would we pursue a policy which the UNHCR has just said yesterday is, in their opinion, in breach of international law? I think this is not a plausible argument from the government. I think it was unwise for the government to solicit that press release from the government of Rwanda. I don't think that we should cast blame on the government of Rwanda, because I think that they are honourable people who want this scheme to work, and I have the highest opinion of our interlocutors in Rwanda, and it's for that reason that I want to do what we said we would do when my right honourable friend created the scheme, which is work with them in good faith to get the job done. I won't give away at the moment. Let me make some more progress on explaining the amendment, if I may. The way that flights will work when this scheme commences is not under the Illegal Migration Act that we passed last year at all. The first several months of flights will be through a group of individuals who my right honourable friend, the member for Whittam, and her officials at the time selected when the Rwanda policy was first devised. Those individuals have been in the United Kingdom for months, or years, many of whom we've lost contact with, none of whom can be subject to the protections in the Illegal Migration Act. So even if you believe that the serious and irreversible harm test within it is a very strict one, and I'll come to that in a moment, that won't apply to the flights that will go off in the months ahead. It may not apply to any flights that go off before the next general election. So if you want those flights to be full of illegal migrants and there to be a deterrent effect, I think you need to support the amendments that I've set out, which create that strict approach. When we do, I'll give way in a moment. When we do come to those individuals who are subject to the Illegal Migration Act's strictures, the government's contention is that the serious and irreversible harm test is a very high one. I don't think that's right. I think the Supreme Court's judgment lowers the bar. The revealed preference of the judiciary is to be generous towards illegal migrants. It is to make this scheme difficult to operationalise. And as this is the last legal opportunity or legislative opportunity for us to tackle this issue, I suggest we get it right and we narrow the opportunities for the judiciary to intervene, or else we're going to find that these flights are symbolic flights with very few individuals on them at all. I will give way.
I'm grateful. I wanted to touch on something that he mentioned earlier on with regard to whether it will work at all. He's very often gone on the record as saying about the Albania scheme, which has been very, very successful. There's now 90% fewer Albanians coming across. In the year to September last year, 2,749 illegal migrants were returned to Albania. They didn't require these amendments, and the law that we currently have allowed them to be returned, and I don't remember hearing about any appeals from those people. So on that basis, and this bill is stricter than what we currently have, why won't it work if it already works on the Albania scheme?
Well, I've heard that argument advanced before, and of course I'm proud of what we've achieved with the Albania scheme, but I think that is judging two quite different propositions. The Albania scheme is taking somebody who is in the United Kingdom and asking them to return to their home country, a European country, a highly developed country. It's a very different proposition, I'd say, to my honourable friend, than asking somebody, in fact, not asking somebody, enforcing that they should be removed from the United Kingdom to a third country which they do not wish to go to. Also, as he may know, very few small boat arrivals have been removed to Rwanda, to Albania. Almost all of those individuals who have gone to Albania have been foreign national offenders in our prisons, time-served FNOs. They've been individuals who have voluntarily chosen to return to Albania, and those who've been in the United Kingdom for a long time. The success of this scheme rests on taking people off small boats, detaining them for very short periods of time, and then removing them swiftly to Rwanda. For the reasons I've just set out, I think that's extremely unlikely to succeed at any scale in the way the bill is currently structured. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady, and then I'll conclude my remarks, if I may.
Caroline Lucas.
I'm grateful to him for giving way and would just point out that people arrive in small boats because legal routes have been blocked. But when it comes to his amendment in particular, Clause 4 of this disgusting bill already provides a very, very limited route for individuals to challenge their removal to Rwanda based on their individual circumstances. Yet my understanding is that the Right Honourable Member is seeking to go even further to override individual legal protections. Even decisions which contain errors would not be open to challenge under his Amendment 22, as I understand it. How on earth is that fair or just or justifiable?
Well, on her first point, we've had this argument many times before, but she's completely wrong. This country is one of the world's most generous countries for supporting those in need around the world. And since 2015, we have issued more than 500,000 visas on humanitarian grounds, more than at any time in our history. On the point she makes about my amendment, it's not correct to say that we wouldn't enable people to challenge on their individual circumstances, but they wouldn't be able to be suspensive. So individuals would arrive in the UK, and within days, which is critical to the success of the scheme, they would be removed to Rwanda, where they could bring forward claims as they may wish, but they wouldn't block the flights. And that is critical, without which the scheme will simply not succeed. What we will also say, I won't give way to the right to remember, what we will also say in this amendment is that there are very narrow grounds in which individuals would not be put on flights, ones the Home Office are very used to dealing with through fitness to travel requirements. And that is a concept that's well known and understood, and I'm certain would work. So what does the amendment do that's different? It narrows down the reasons why which individuals could make claims and makes the scheme legally and operationally workable for the first time. Now, Dame Rosie, Sir Roger, Damascene conversion. We've tried to be constructive in bringing forward this and other amendments. The Prime Minister set a test to me and to anyone who shares my determination to tackle this issue. And that was as follows, that he would accept any amendment, whether it strengthened this bill, if there were respectable legal arguments in international law in their favour. Now, we can argue about whether that test is the right one. Personally, I feel very strongly that there are times when contested notions of international law should not surpass either parliamentary sovereignty or, above all, the interests of our constituents. And border security and national security are the prime responsibilities of any government. But that was the test. We've met the test. We instructed a very eminent lawyer, John Larkin, KC, former Attorney General of Northern Ireland, to provide us with an opinion. The opinion says that each and every one of the amendments in my name and that of the member for Stone are compliant with international law. Unless the goalposts have been shifted by the government, I see no reason why the Prime Minister and the Minister couldn't accept these amendments and enable us to strengthen this bill once and for all. Sir Roger, I'll conclude by saying this. At the outset, I said that there was one question hanging over this debate, what works. There is a further question. How much are we actually willing to do to stop the boats? How are we willing to take on the vested interests, balance the trade-offs, take the robust steps that will actually work? The only countries in the world that have fixed this problem, latterly Australia and Greece, have been willing to take the most robust action. Are we? Well, I am. I want to stop the boats and secure our borders. This is a difficult issue, but we're not a parish council struggling with some kind of intractable legal issue. We're a sovereign parliament. The power is in our hands. We have agency. The law is our servant, not our master. I would urge all right honourable and honourable members to support the amendments in my name and those of my honourable friend, the member for Stone, and create a scheme that actually works. That's what our constituents expect of us. That is the promise that the Prime Minister has made to them and the whole country.
Hear, hear. Opposition front bench, Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. I rise to speak in favour of Amendments 35 and 37 and new Clause 6, tabled in the name of the Shadow Home Secretary and myself. But may I just start by reminding the House and anyone watching at home that the Labour Party is opposed to this bill in its entirety, for the simple reason that we are opposed to the Rwanda scheme in its entirety. We have been absolutely clear that we need to stop the Conservative small boats chaos, and we need to fix our broken asylum system. But those aims can only be achieved by way of measures that are based on common sense, hard graft, and international cooperation, as opposed to headline chasing and government by gimmick from the benches opposite. Now, the benches opposite like to accuse us of opposing everything that the government is doing to stop the Tory small boats chaos, but that is simply not the case. We on these benches fully support measures such as the deal with Albania, because that is the sort of sensible, pragmatic action that can make a tangible difference. And we've repeatedly made our support for this course of action crystal clear, if only the benches opposite would care to listen. But the Labour Party will never support any proposal that is unaffordable, unworkable or unlawful. And Mr. Chairman, I will goodbye.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and would he agree with me that the government is being extremely neglectful with the public purse by throwing money at the Rwanda scheme that simply will not work?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. It's quite remarkable that a party that used to pride itself on being the party of fiscal rectitude is throwing £400 million of taxpayers' money at the government of Rwanda for precisely nothing. The only thing they've got so far is they've sent 3 Home Secretaries to Rwanda, but not a single asylum seeker. And Mr. Chair, the Rwanda plan is all of the above. It is unaffordable, it is unworkable, and it is unlawful. It's unaffordable to the British taxpayer because a truly staggering £400 million of our taxpayers' money is on the way to the Rwandan government without a single asylum seeker landing in Rwanda. It's unworkable because we know that the Rwandan authorities are only capable of less than 1% of the 30,000 who crossed the Channel in small boats in 2023, according to the Court of Appeal. In order for a deterrent to be effective, it has to be credible. And surely even the most ardent supporter of this policy would acknowledge that such a tiny chance of being sent to Rwanda is ever going to deter someone who has risked life and limb to cross continents to escape from persecution and violence.
The Foreign Office recently admitted that hundreds of Afghans eligible for resettlement have not been brought into the UK. They exemplify the need for safe and legal routes. And is it not a case that those are exactly the people who are risking life and limb because they cannot get the legal and safe routes that the government should provide?
The Honourable Lady is right, and a case in point, of course, is the Afghan schemes. The Arab scheme has more or less collapsed. The ACRS is not working at all. And which nationality is always in the top 2 or 3 to be crossing on the small boats? The Afghans. It's pretty straightforward. So we oppose the Rwanda policy because it's not a deterrent, it's a distraction. Far better, as the Shadow Home Secretary and myself and others have set out many times in this chamber, to redirect the vast quantities of taxpayers' money that are being wasted on the Rwanda scheme into a new cross-border police unit and into a new security partnership with Europol, which can smash the criminal smuggler gangs upstream. I will give way.
I'm very grateful. I think he's making a really important point about how we need to be cooperating much more intensively with the law enforcement agencies across Europe. The brutal fact is this: these gangs are putting people into boats that were made for rivers, not sea, in treacherous conditions. I mean, who in their right mind would go in one of those dinghies in the English Channel right now? But people are being forced to do that by these gangs. We need to smash the gangs, and we can only do that by working with our colleagues across Europe to make sure that we bring this to an end.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and if we accept that international cooperation with our European partners and allies has to be at the heart of the dealing with the gangs, as he so eloquently sets out, the possibility of that cooperation is fundamentally undermined when we have a government that is flagrantly prepared to break international law, which should underpin the trust that is a prerequisite for all of this cooperation to happen. So this cooperation based on joint working and intelligence sharing with our partners and allies is only possible if Britain is deemed to be a trustworthy partner. And that brings me to the third reason for us opposing the legislation that's before us today and for opposing the amendments that have been tabled by so many on the benches opposite. Because, Mr. Chair, we find ourselves in an utterly extraordinary position. We find ourselves debating a government policy which has been found to be unlawful by the highest court in our land. Amendment 35, which I'll come to shortly, reflects that very fact. And we find ourselves confronted by a government that is seeking to legislate for an alternative reality. Because whilst ministers appear to believe that they can pass a bill which determines that the sky is green and the grass is blue, that does not make it so. I will give way.
Has it escaped the honourable gentleman's notice that there was one claim that was dismissed by the Supreme Court judgment on Rwanda, and that was in Iraqi, the case of ASM. And the reason for it is very simple, and the court made this crystal clear in paragraph 144 of its judgment, that the issue in question was undermined, as far as that claimant was concerned, by clear and unambiguous words in an Act of Parliament. In other words, the sovereignty of Parliament prevailed.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his comments, but the point with the sovereignty of Parliament, of course, Parliament is sovereign. And of course, we in this place are sent here to make laws. But we must make those laws with restraint. We must make those laws whilst respecting the judicial function. The separation of powers is fundamental to our identity as a liberal democracy. So whilst he does very often talk about the sovereignty of Parliament, it is absolutely vital that his comments must always be founded on the principle of the checks and balances that the separation of powers gives us. I will give way.
Well, Tim, just to tease out a little bit more what Labour policy is on that specific issue that he referred to, is he ruling out any consideration of this House determining to overturn the wrongful convictions of hundreds of sub-postmasters simply because that would be setting a new precedent in the relationship between this House and the courts?
Well, that's an interesting one. I didn't have it on my bingo card today to be talking about the sub-postmasters scandal. Look, Parliament is free to legislate in any way that it wishes, but it has to do so taking full recognition of the view of the courts. And I note that a number of eminent legal experts have raised some concerns about the government's proposed approach on the sub-postmasters. We have to see precisely how the detail of that looks, and it is our duty in this Parliament to scrutinise that very carefully and to ensure that we're not setting dangerous precedents. What I would argue is there is no doubt whatsoever that the bill before us today is a deeply dangerous, profoundly dangerous precedent because it seeks to directly overturn the findings of the highest court in our land. And I would argue that that is a toxic approach, Mr. Chair. I'll give way to this.
Very grateful to the Shadow Minister for giving way. Has he not seen all the comments and budget lines that this government has put out, stating that it is cooperating extensively and fully with continental countries over trying to crack down on this awful trade which is leading to deaths in these small boats, and that the proof of that is that money is sent to France in order to help them with their tasks, and there is no evidence that they're not cooperating?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his comments. The cooperation with France is to be welcomed. The problem with it is it's too far downstream. What we need to see is far better cooperation upstream, which is about sharing data, fixing the issue with the databases. My right honourable friend, the Shadow Home Secretary and the Leader of the Opposition visited Europol recently to come forward with very practical and detailed plans around getting the data sharing right. And that may actually then address the issue that the number of prosecutions of criminal smuggler gangs is going down on this government's watch. The number of returns and removals has gone down by 50% since 2010. So I think it's, again, we go back to this point about let's put more energy and resources into the pragmatic, sensible things that can actually make a difference, as opposed to being distracted by this madcap Rwanda scheme. So, Mr. Chair, it's a mark, if I could just make a little bit of progress. Mr. Chair, it is a mark of a liberal democracy that courts are independent of Parliament and the executive. And we on these benches believe passionately that this separation of powers is a fundamental and immutable element of what makes us proud to be British. So we on these benches are not only opposed to the specifics of this bill, Mr. Chair, we are also deeply troubled by what it represents in a broader sense. And I will give way.
Christmas period, the Labour front bench anonymously briefed the Times to say that they would want to pursue an offshore processing model. Is that correct, that it is his position and that of the Shadow Home Secretary? And if so, why would they want to do something which is known to be more expensive and less effective, because you have to bring everyone back to the United Kingdom one way or another, and so you create no deterrent whatsoever but one wouldn't want to move forward with a scheme like Rwanda.
Well, I thank the former immigration minister for his comments, and I must say I did enjoy opposing him and working with him on some occasions, and I thank him for his comments. What I would say is that if you look at the Ukraine scheme, that is an example of offshore processing. Those applications were processed in Poland before they came to our country. Look at the Hong Kong scheme. There are plenty of ways of doing upstream processing, offshore processing, and to coin a phrase, what matters is what works. And what is absolutely clear is this Rwanda, and it's difficult to imagine any scheme that could be more expensive than this one. But I'm going to make some progress. What I would cite is the view of the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law and countless other legal experts who have stated that this bill is contrary to the rule of law because it amounts to a legislative usurpation of the judicial function. It is an assault on our country's constitutional conventions, which require the legislature to respect the essence of the judicial function. Moreover, there is a staggering hypocrisy at the heart of this bill when you consider it in the context of the treaty that has been signed with Rwanda. Because the purpose of that treaty is to bind the Rwandan government into respecting the rule of law, and in particular the principle of non-refoulement. But how on earth can ministers hold the Rwandan authorities to account on these matters if they themselves are so blatantly and egregiously failing to practice what they preach?
The Honourable Gentleman, it is a little disingenuous to liken the Ukrainian scheme. The only criteria for the Ukrainian scheme is you had to be Ukrainian and come from Ukraine. He just mentioned enforcement, and he said that it had gone down. So up to the end of November 2023, Home Office Immigration